In 2026, something strange began to happen. Selected fans around the world started receiving VHS tapes in the mail. The tapes contained distorted imagery, fragments of speech, mysterious symbols, and signals that seemed to come from another time. Soon after, cryptic posters appeared in major cities. Online communities began dissecting every frame, every sound, every hidden detail. For longtime fans, it felt familiar, because this wasn't the first time Boards of Canada had communicated through clues instead of announcements. For more than 3 decades, the Scottish duo has cultivated one of the most devoted followings in electronic music, not through visibility, but through mystery. Few interviews, almost no public appearances, no live shows, long periods of silence, and a body of work that seems to exist somewhere between memory and dream. But why? Why do people treat an electronic music duo like an unsolved mystery? To answer that question, we have to understand what makes Boards of Canada so unique. Not just their music, but the world they've built around it. Boards of Canada consists of the two Scottish brothers Micah Sanderson and Marcus Ian. They began making music together in the late 1980s, experimenting with synthesizers, tape recorders, and film cameras. Many of their earliest recordings were released only in tiny cassette runs. Some of them have never been reissued. Others are believed to be lost entirely. At the same time, the brothers were part of the Hexagon Sun, a loose creative collective of musicians, artists and friends based in Scotland. The collective would have helped shape not only their music, but also the visual language and philosophy that came to define Boards of Canada. Then, in 1998, everything changed. Their breakthrough album, Music Has the Right to Children, was released in widespread critical acclaim and quickly became one of the most influential electronic records of its era. For most artists, success brings visibility, more interviews, more photographs and more appearances. For Boards of Canada, the opposite happened. They became increasingly difficult to find. Interviews grew rare. Live performances nearly disappeared. Years would pass between releases. And that's where the mythology truly began. Not with hidden messages, not with cryptic codes, but with absence. Because the less the duo revealed about themselves, the more the audience began searching for meaning within the music. The question most people ask about Boards of Canada is surprisingly simple. Why do they sound so different from everyone else? Part of the answer lies in their tools. Vintage synthesizers, tape machines, worn-out equipment, and analog processing. But equipment alone doesn't explain it. What makes Boards of Canada unique is their relationship with imperfection. From an early age, the brothers experimented with recording sounds onto cassette tape, copying them repeatedly until they became degraded and distorted. Rather than treating this deterioration as a flaw, they embraced it. Throughout their music, sounds are slowed down, pitch shifted, copied, damaged, or aged, as if they had been recovered from an archive rather than created in the studio. Many tracks feel like fragments of forgotten educational films or fading television broadcasts from decades ago. The result is a sound that feels strangely familiar, not because it reminds us of a specific memory, but because it evokes the feeling of memory itself. Perhaps the best way to describe Boards of Canada is this. They often sound like a memory of something you never actually experienced. Their music exists somewhere between childhood and dream, between nostalgia and uncertainty, between what we remember and what we imagine. And that emotional ambiguity became the foundation of everything that followed. Trying to place Boards of Canada into a single genre is surprisingly difficult. They are often associated with IDM, but at the same time their music draws heavily from ambient music. The focus is often atmosphere rather than rhythm, emotion rather than energy. Elements of downtempo, electronica, hip-hop production techniques, psychedelic music and even folk music can also be found throughout their work. Each of Boards of Canada's albums feel like a chapter in a larger narrative. Music Has the Right to Children is the sound of childhood, warm synthesizers, children's voices, fragments of educational films. It feels less like an album and more like a collection of half-remembered moments. Then came Giugetti. Giorgetti felt unsettling. The music became darker, more fragmented, more mysterious. Themes of numerology, hidden symbolism, and unease began to emerge. Many listeners described the album as beautiful but deeply disorienting. In 2005, the Campfire Head phase took a different direction. Acoustic guitars moved to the foreground. The music became more organic, more reflective. It felt like a landscape viewed through memory, a world of forests, summer evenings in fading light. Then, after the years of silence, came Tomorrow's Harvest. This time, Boards of Canada stopped looking back. Instead, they looked ahead, and what they saw was unsettling. The album feels cold, desolate, almost post-apocalyptic. Abandoned cities, fading systems, a future slowly collapsing under its own weight. Of course, there's more music, but taken together, these 4 albums form a remarkable progression, from childhood to uncertainty to melancholy and collapse. Sampling plays a central role in the music of Boards of Canada, but unlike many producers, they rarely use samples as obvious reference. Instead, they transform them into emotional artifacts. Over the years, the duo collected sounds from educational films, nature documentaries, television broadcasts, records, and countless other sources.
Nothingness
comes to a greater awareness of itself.
The divine intellect. I am the truth, extinction, diversion of reality, consciousness. I am God, the ultimate.
Resonance.
The spirit and the soul, or the psyche, unconscious and transcendent source, the seat of consciousness.
I am the truth, the extinction, the question of reality, consciousness. I am God, the ultimate resonance, the spirit and the soul, the psyche, consciousness, transcendent source, seat of consciousness, power.
Many of these samples appear only briefly, a voice, a phrase, a distant sound buried beneath layers of tape noise. Often they are manipulated beyond recognition, slowed down, filtered, reversed, copied repeatedly onto tape. The original context disappears. What's particularly fascinating is that many of these sources remain unidentified to this day. Fans have spent years attempting to trace them back to their origins. Some have been discovered, many remain unsolved. And that mystery is part of the appeal. The samples feel familiar, yet the origins remain just out of reach. One of the most fascinating examples of Boards of Canada's approach to sampling can be found on their 2000s EP In a Beautiful Place Out in the Country. The title comes from a recording of Almo Bishop Roden, a member of the Branch Davidian movement, a religious cult based near Waco in Texas.
They talk about cults and they say their cults are dangerous, but all you ever actually see in the news is governments killing cults. You don't see cults killing anybody. And I don't think when you come out and live in a religious community in a beautiful place out in the country and you're away from crime, that you suddenly are overcome with this suicidal impulse. It hasn't happened to me, I promise.
On the surface, the message sounds peaceful, a quiet life surrounded by nature, away from the pressures of modern society. But history would take a darker turn. In 1993, the Branch Davidians became the center of the infamous Waco siege, a 51-day standoff between the group and the US federal agents that ended in a fire killing more than 70 people. What makes the sample so uniquely Boards of Canada is that they don't focus on the tragedy itself, they focus on the promise that came before it, the dream of a better life, the hope that attracted people in the first place. And side fact, the connection to the Branch Davidians extends beyond the sample. The artwork of In a Beautiful Place Out in the Country features photographs of the site and David Koresh, a leader of the cult itself. Yet Boards of Canada present the location not as a crime scene, but as a memory, quiet, empty, almost peaceful. It's another example of their fascination with places where nostalgia and unease coexist. If the music itself feels mysterious, the world surrounding Boards of Canada can feel even more. No album illustrates this better as Geogaddy. Fans quickly noticed unusual details. The album's runtime is exactly 66 minutes and 6 seconds. Track titles referenced mathematics, religion, and duality. Certain vocal fragments appear to contain hidden messages when played backwards. One famous example has been interpreted as the phrase, "a god with horns." Whether these details point toward a deeper meaning remains open to interpretation, and perhaps that's the point. Boards of Canada rarely provide definitive explanations. They create possibilities, but the most ambitious mystery arrived in 2013. After 8 years of silence, a strange vinyl record appeared during Record Store Day. It contained only a brief piece of music and a 6-digit number.
9, 3, 6, 5, 5, 7.
Days later, more number sequences emerged through radio broadcasts, online videos, and media outlets around the world. Fans began collecting the fragments, comparing notes, searching for connections. Eventually, the pieces formed a complete code. Shortly after, a cryptic Facebook post appeared and led to the Shibuya crossing in Tokyo. And then this happened. At the event, a previously unheard excerpt from the new material was played, and at the same time, additional fragments of the numerical sequence surfaced, forming a part of the larger code. As fans around the world gathered information and pieced the clues together, a new website called Cosecha Transmisiones, Spanish for Harvest Transmissions, appeared. The site required a password. Once all 6 number codes had been deciphered and correctly assembled, the website finally opened and revealed the solution to the mystery: the title of the new album, Tomorrow's Harvest, along with its release date and the first previews of the music. It was one of the most unusual album announcements in modern music. Boards of Canada hadn't marketed a record, they had created a puzzle, and thousands of people participated. After all the codes, the hidden messages, and the years of mystery, a simple question remains: why? The obvious answer would be marketing, but that explanation feels incomplete. Boards of Canada have never behaved like artists seeking maximum attention. Instead, their work suggests something else. Their music is built around memory, the feeling that something remains just beyond our understanding. The codes operate exactly in the same way. They invite participation, they encourage curiosity, they transform listeners into explorers. Perhaps Boards of Canada don't simply release music, perhaps they create experiences. Experience that ask us to search rather than consume, to wonder rather than conclude. Most artists communicate answers, Boards of Canada create questions. For years, it seemed possible that Tomorrow's Harvest would be the final chapter. Then came the VHS tapes, the posters, the signals, the return of a familiar mystery. Eventually, the campaign revealed its destination: a new album, Inferno. And the prize? Perhaps the release date? Well, musically it felt both familiar and transformed. The warmth of earlier records remained, but the scale had grown larger, more cinematic, more expensive, and darker than ever. Yet, the most remarkable thing wasn't the album itself, it was the realization that after all these years, nothing fundamental had changed. Boards of Canada was still doing what they always done, sending signals, leaving fragments, inviting interpretation. Because in a world obsessed with certainty, they continue to embrace mystery. The signal is still out there, and we are still listening. And yet we've barely begun. This video provides only an overview of Boards of Canada's music, history, and artistic themes. However, many aspects of their work, from sample research to unreleased recordings and promotional mysteries, deserve a much deeper look. Every album, every image, every sample seems to lead toward another layer of interpretation. For those interested in exploring further, I've included additional resources and references in the description below. So, thanks for watching.